We will go ahead and get started. Let's see. Yes. Okay. So hello and welcome. My name is Emmeline Benson. I'm the Programs and Communication Manager for the Clifton Cultural Arts Center. Thank you so much for joining us for our first virtual Sunset Salons of the 2020-21 season. We're really grateful that you've taken the time to tune in tonight. A couple of housekeeping announcements. As you saw at the beginning, all of our attendees, we ask that you please keep your videos off and your mics muted. If you have questions for the panel, we would love to hear them. Please just use the chat function on Zoom. If you're watching on Facebook, go ahead and type them into the comment section of Facebook, and we will pass those over to our panel. This conversation event is hosted in conjunction with our third place exhibition, which is currently on display here at CCAC's Short Vine location. We're going to talk a little bit about that later in the conversation, but I encourage you to come make a reservation to view the exhibition before it closes. And very quickly, we want to thank our sponsors who have provided support for this program: FotoFocus, the Ohio Arts Council, and the thousands of donors who give annually to the ArtsWave campaign. So a virtual round of applause for those folks. And now, with no more further ado, we're going to hand it over to our featured panel.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much to CCAC for hosting us. I'm delighted to be here tonight with photographers Alexandra Buxbaum, Emily Momahara, and Jens Rosenkrantz to participate in Sunset Salons. As Emmeline mentioned, I'm with FotoFocus. I'm the Deputy Director of Exhibitions and Programming. And for those that don't already know what we are, we're a nonprofit lens-based organization here in Cincinnati. We present the FotoFocus Biennial, symposiums, a lecture series, as well as a film program. But we also have a philanthropic arm. We've given over 500 grants to lens-based partners in the region, including the recent FotoFocus Emergency Art Grant, to over 80 venues in lieu of presenting the 2020 Biennial. That was a very difficult decision for us, but a necessary one. That we made in light of COVID to directly support our regional arts community, including the Clifton Cultural Arts Center and the third place exhibition currently on view. And just a note that CCAC has been a FotoFocus participating venue since our very first biennial in 2012. Just a few words about the third place exhibition. The title third place refers to places where people spend time between the first place, which is home, and the second place, which is work. These third places are essential for building relationships and exchanging ideas. In a lens-based interpretation of third place, the CCAC exhibit asks artists and viewers to consider both literal and figurative references, how third places enlighten us and encourage us to lighten up. Though the theme of this exhibition was conceived prior to the pandemic, it seems more practical than ever to actively consider the ways in which we come together. Some images you'll see tonight point directly to an increased desire for physical proximity, while other images seem to orient themselves towards vacancy and quieting. Third place includes the work of 14 artists, is on view until October 24th, and features two of our panelists tonight, photographer Alexandra and one of the co-curators, Jens. Now I'd like to invite each one of our panelists to give a brief introduction. We'll start with Alexandra, then Jens, and then Emily.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Buxbaum. My work is primarily street photography, and I also do a lot of I also do work for clients. I have a big client base. I do some media work, and I do a lot of work for corporate clients and also some for NGOs too. It's where I primarily derive my income from.
Jens?
Yeah, my name is Jens Rosenkrantz. I'm a photographer also, but also run a gallery here in Pendleton over the Rhine in Cincinnati. So it's called the Annex Gallery because we've morphed from Pendleton street photography. And so this is actually the current exhibition that's in the gallery space. And so I work with Leslie on putting together the exhibition, third place. And I guess we'll talk more about that or save that for later, yes, how that came about.
Thanks. Emily?
Oh, my name is Emily Hanako Momohara. I am a artist, an educator. I am an associate professor at the Art Academy of Cincinnati. I work primarily in photography and video, but also dabble a little bit in some social practice and public art, as well as a little sculpture.
Great. We will start with an icebreaker question submitted by CCAC tonight. So for each of you, what is your favorite piece of public art? Where is it and why? Mine is hands down the Rothko Chapel. It is in Houston, and it is on next to the property of the Menil Collection. And it is a piece that is extraordinarily, I think, powerful to me. I have a literal physical response to it. And so for me, I'm going with the Rothko Chapel. How about you, Emily?
That's a tough one. I mean, there's so many great pieces. Right now, of course, with my practice and kind of the work that I'm looking at, I'm thinking about social justice. And so when you ask that question, I think about a piece that Ai Weiwei did in Berlin, where he took 14,000 life vests from folks that were fleeing Turkey and came onto the Greek shores. And then he started to take the columns of the museum where his exhibition was installed and just covered them, so they turned out to be this kind of orange, like soft sculpture of life vests holding up the front of the museum.
What about you, Alexandra?
Well, my favorite is the Marfa Prada storefront, which is in West Texas. It's in the middle of nowhere in the desert. And it looks like something you took out of Rodeo Drive and just stuck in off the highway, you know, with tumbleweeds. And I just love the humor of it. It's near an artist towns, and it's very well known. And I from what I understand, even Beyonce has stopped there. But I just love it. I just love the fun play on the two different worlds, and something that you totally would not expect. So that's it's kind of wacky, but that's kind of one of my favorite pieces of public art.
It's a shocking scene. It really is. It's remarkable. Jens.
Yeah, what I think of is the murals that are over at Findlay Market here in Cincinnati. You know, it kind of ties in with, bringing art outside, with less people, going inside is, really like seeing the art on the outside, and having met some of the artists who put together, and this is, not just the artworks, but the actual, like London Police and Veals, and seeing them produce the work, Logan Hicks. So it's a great performance piece, and also, it's like a amazing gallery that will be there for a long time.
Absolutely. Emily, I was thinking about several bodies of your work, and in particular, Detention Past, re-photographs of American incarceration camps, and also the series Fruits of Labor, in relation to this next question, which is, how can photography help foster an understanding of and facilitate empathy towards those who are perceived as the other? What is the power and responsibility and opportunity of photography and photographers to facilitate more than just awareness and witness, but to be a call for change and action?
It's a really complicated question, I think. I think there's a variety of ways that you can go about it. The ways in which my gallery work has done that, I think is much more on an intellectual and personal level. So you have ways of making change that are institutional. You have ways of like breaking down the system, and then you have ways of talking one-on-one and educating folks and sharing personal experience. I think that's definitely the route that the work that I've done in galleries has taken. I think the responsibility aspect of that really applies across the board. So in the understanding that images are power, right? We are literally have the ability to frame, to discard certain information, to hide information, or to add information. Like, images really are power, and that mode of communication, I think, needs to be handled responsibly. So anyone that's working with social issues, thinking about who your audience is, um, who is in the images and how those folks feel about their participation as a partner in the work, whose stories are telling, who's telling those stories, all those questions I think are really complicated, and based on, you know, an individual project might be a different answer for each of those. But I think for like the public work that I've done, maybe some of the work with For Freedoms, the billboard work and things like that, you know, I'm really thinking about streamlining and making streamlining my message and dealing with something maybe that's less nuanced than a gallery show can kind of open up all these conversations, right? Because people spend more time with it. And public art, people don't seem to spend as much time with, right? They just kind of, they see it on their way to work or, you know, different things, and they don't really spend as much time. So for me, that has kind of a different audience. So a different tactic that I take about really trying to get us, you know, a concise message out and thinking about how to do that. And then maybe in the gallery, I might do something like, in Fruits of Labor, which was a FotoFocus sponsored show. Thank you. And you know, I created an entire wall full of images that were linked together visually, that had clocks in them and all kinds, you know, so it was like a journey. You had to literally walk through this this wall. And I think that you can really do that on, oh, look at there it is. You can really do that when you have people that are willing to give you that time in the gallery space. So complicated question, and I hope my answer was adequate.
It was, and I'm glad you brought up For Freedoms, because that's a project you mentioned. Public art doesn't get as much attention. I hope that project, I think that project is changing that in terms of visibility, action, and engagement. So For Freedoms is I'm very glad that For Freedoms is part of this conversation, because it's really important right now in the conversation we're having about the world, and in particular our country. I want to jump to Alexandra. This is along those same lines. In light of your work documenting the human experience, and the street photography aspect of your work, how do you think the mediating effects of a lens can benefit and problematize community building? Is it possible to photograph communities without othering the subjects?
Well, the photography that I do has, it's been a wonderful opportunity for me that I've been able to access other people's lives and experience different worlds that a lot of people don't get a chance to do. And when you're a photographer, in some ways, you're always the outsider, even within your own tribe. So with photography, you kind of you belong at the same time, and at the same time you do not belong. So I think if you look, you know, if you come to a subject without any preconceived notions, and you look at people, you know, with an open heart, with loving eyes, then I think that'll come through, and you don't perceive that person in a negative way. So, and sometimes being an outsider, though, if you're not part of this community you're photographing, or a region you're photographing, it kind of lets you observe things that maybe if you're in that community you do not notice, subtle little things. I mean, at the same time, people that live in that community would know things that I do not know. So I think it kind of depends on, you know, how you approach people. And if you're a good person, and if you have a good heart, I think then it's, you know, hard to portray people in a negative way. And I think, you know, your photographs can also help open up the, you know, what you're seeing, and open that up to other people, to help other people then begin to not see this person or this group as the other, and begin to empathize with them. And I think that's how you can, how your lens then can be used in a beneficial way towards what is, you know, what is considered the other, which, so I think it depends on the person and their approach.
Yeah, I think we'll talk a little bit later about how your process and everyone's process has been affected by COVID. and the way we interact with communities, particularly for those that are out and like that's your job, like whether it's assignment work or just street photography. That street looks very different right now. So we'll talk a little bit about that later and get into some of those details about each of your practices and your perspectives on that. I'd like to switch to Third Place and talk a little bit about that exhibition, particularly for Jens and Alexandra. Both of you are involved in the project. And I'm curious, Jens, can you give some additional insight on the development of the theme and the curatorial process behind Third Place?
Well, the curation, we put a call out, with the title, but to start with, it was sitting around with Leslie and, wanting to put together a proposal, for FotoFocus with the overall theme. And because of what Clifton Cultural Arts Center is doing right now is, in temporary space, looking for permanent space. So, and just riffing ideas back and forth, the Third Place just came up. And I think it had to do about space. And then, of course, we're both familiar with the book and about Third Place. And so it just seemed to make sense, and maybe some of it was just to raise awareness about what that is what Clifton CCAC is about. It is a community gathering place that is being, with some difficulty right now, but, going through the challenges and then looking for a permanent Third Place. So that's how it all evolved. And then we put a call out and then pandemic, COVID hit and it, slowed down. And so we weren't sure what was going to happen going forward, but we had a good body of work and decided to go forward and have the opening and I think it's worked out very well. So Leslie and Emily and myself went through the images and selected the final choices.
And Alexandra, as an artist in the exhibition, do you want to talk about the process of how you interpreted the theme and the invitation?
Sure. I love the idea of this exhibition because I've always been fascinated by the universal human need to belong and be with people who are like us, or share the same interest, or share the same lifestyles. Whether that be a fraternity club or whether there's dance halls you like going to. We just like to hang, be around and hang with people that are like us. We can't pick our siblings, and we can't pick our coworkers, and we can't pick the environments that we always work in, but we can choose whom we spend our free time with. And this is kind of an opportunity in this Third Place for people to just, be themselves. And that's what I liked about the idea of this exhibition. For example, in my photo, the cowboy dance hall, that was a meeting of cattle ranchers from across the country. And it was just a social event, and they were just, it was like, they're just having fun and they're dancing, and it's just like they could just kind of be themselves in that environment, in that place. And the other photo of mine that I chose was, it's called Pierogi. It's a Pierogi Fest, and it's in a small town in Indiana that's just across the border from Illinois. And there's a lot of people in this area that are of Eastern Europe and especially Polish descent. So this festival, it was kind of an idea for them to celebrate their heritage. They're very proud of their heritage, but at the same time, they are also, of all the bad stereotypes of that heritage, they're kind of poking fun of and having fun with of the stereotypes. Like they have the babushkas, although a lot of the women will dress up like their grandmothers, and you have the lawnmower brigade, you have the a parade of men with lawnmowers and sandals and socks, and they're kind of imitating their dads. So they're having fun with it. They're poking fun of the stereotypes, but they're doing it in a way that is also showing the pride of their heritage.
I enjoyed Googling the one sign on the one man's back. We had fun. So I wonder what that means. So I Googled it. That was funny.
Yeah. So, I was very excited to participate in this exhibition, and I just love the idea behind this show.
And then also, I think what happens is, because I think we're missing that right now. We're missing this gathering places. So it really does, bring it to the forefront. I mean, yeah, there it is.
Yes, we are missing. And I was just out of curious. I just Googled Pierogi Fest 2020, and it's been canceled this year due to COVID, because it's usually held during the summer. So, I mean, as you can see, all the women are dressed as, having fun as the babushkas, as like their grandmothers. So it's, and then, they have all the food, they have really good food there. They have good event too. Just kind of, it's a very unique event.
And there was a lot of discussion or questions about what was going on at that particular moment when that photo was taken. Were they announcing a winner or some celebration?
I forget exactly, but I think at one time, this was along a parade route and everyone was gathered. And at one time, everyone went, and threw their hands up. So I'm not sure if it was planned. I don't remember it. No one was announced as a winner. I don't remember quite exactly what triggered it, but they would just do fun things like this.
Yeah, it's a great shot.
So thanks.
And for those of you that are just joining us, the exhibition Third Place is on view at the Clifton Cultural Arts Center through October 24th. So I want to switch gears a little bit. This conversation is about communities, but I think it's important to talk about our own artistic communities. And I'd like for each of the panelists to answer some questions about how their work process has been affected, has evolved, and has been impacted by particularly the aspects of COVID that are about traveling and engaging with subjects. And I'm going to start with Emily. And I've known Emily's work and have known Emily for a very long time. And so much of the work incorporates, or so much of the process for the work incorporates travel, research, residency work, engagement and entrenchment in communities that she's focusing on and shooting on location at. And so I'm really curious for you, Emily, like how has this environment changed not only your practice, but you're also in academia. So I'm also wondering what how the academic community has been affected and how your life has been kind of changed in terms of your practice and your, kind of secondary, the other practice of teaching.
Well, I was on sabbatical this spring and I was finishing up a documentary that I'm working on. And there was definitely some travel involved. The narrator was supposed to come here to Cincinnati so I could record them, and that didn't happen. And I did make a trip by car to Seattle because I was afraid to get on an airplane to film a few things. But yeah, it definitely I had to put the brakes, kind of on this project and get as far as I could without shooting more. I think that it did make me shift my gears though and do some other work that maybe I hadn't anticipated doing. I've gotten much more involved in a statewide Asian American progressive women's organization where we were doing some work around the census, around dealing with racism within our own communities. And so I think that work just kind of shifted a little bit. I did just put up an exhibition about the work that I did for my sabbatical, which is really weird. It's like a giant video sketchbook, if that's what you want to think, because it's got video stills and a couple of clips and things like that, just outlining what it is. So it's definitely not being able to travel has really changed the way that I can work. I was fortunate enough to be able to go to the Four Freedoms Congress the last week of February and the Society for Photographic Education conference the first week of March. And then when I came back, everything was closed down. So I did go to both of those events, and that was pretty amazing. So that leads into academia. We're all just trying to figure out the best way to do things. I think at least the Art Academy is hybrid. So we're teaching online and in person. So I might have, like I have a class of 18 people in my history of photography class, and 5 of them are online and the rest of them are in person. So, really trying to figure out ways to engage students simultaneously with various different in-person and digital practices. And I apologize if you can hear the screaming. Can you hear the screaming? Okay. I live across the street from Roger Bacon, and I think one of their sports teams is out there like going, rah, rah, and they're doing some kind of chanting. So I apologize. Anyway, I digress. So I think like at school, we're all, just kind of sharing ideas with each other on how to do things better. And we're not doing a lot of studio work. We are really focused just on the classroom and trying to make the students' experience as seamless as we can, for all of us to be a united front to support them, because, a lot of these students, especially the freshmen, I just feel for them so much. This is their first year of college, and it's such a strange time to be in the classroom. So
It's a strange time for us all, that's for sure. Emily, can you remind us where we can see the exhibition?
of my sabbatical show, it's at the Art Academy of Cincinnati in the Converges Gallery. It's right as you walk into the building. There are a few, limit things. You have to wear a mask. You'll have to get your temperature taken on your wrist when you walk in, and security will make sure that you do that. But you can go into the galleries. Yeah.
And how long is it up?
It's up through the end of the month, the 23rd, I believe, probably the same timeline, right, as the CCAC show.
Fantastic. So go check that out at the Art Academy for sure. Speaking of galleries, let's move over to Jens, who is sitting in his gallery. Jens, you came to photography as a third career after investments and after restaurants. You are an artist, a photographer, as well as a gallery owner and a curator. I think you have a lot that you can contribute to this question in terms of what does COVID look like for you. But I'm also curious about your artistic practice, because a lot of the work in your archive of over 5,000 images is work that is taken on travels in other places. A lot of it is Cincinnati. But I'm curious, you also spearhead this Cuban art exchange. So how are the COVID limitations affected not only your practice, but collaborations?
Well, COVID wiped out my whole year. I mean, not only the gallery, all the exhibitions are going to be Cuban artists. The one that's currently up right now is a Cuban artist that was supposed to take place in spring, but obviously that didn't happen. And it's a exhibition of Trump portraits from a Cuban perspective. So I decided to put it up anyway. The Cuban artist is trying to get here, but is not here. But I wanted to put it up, before the election. Otherwise, it becomes kind of just put it back in storage. And then as far as our Bridges Not Walls project, generally we've been going down there 2 or 3 times a year with exhibitions. We're actually trying to do a collaboration with CAC and Fabrica d'Arte Cubano. We had a lot of programming queued up, and now that's shut down because Cuba's shut down the travel, the tourism travel, but the State Department here has used that as an excuse to shut down flights. So, and to tighten up on the embargo. So it's really wiped out the gallery, but also, yes, you're right about the, my travel photography is a lot of it is in Cuba to tell the story about Bridges Not Walls. Take pictures of cars, which everybody loves, but I'm also showing what is going on in Cuba right now with the people and how they're struggling. So it's definitely put a hold on what I'm doing. It's probably why I decided to expand the gallery and doing some other type of programming. Right now, I've done a couple road trips just because I've gone stir crazy and get in my car and do some back road travel. I did a drive along the Ohio River, shooting the bridges all the way up into West Virginia, and then did a road trip to Chicago on the back road. So yeah, it's a tough time, but you pivot, and so we're working on reprogramming the calendar.
And your gallery is open. So for those who want to go see art in person, we're giving you plenty of opportunities to go see exhibitions that are up live and in person. It's hard over the course of the last 6 months to have virtual conversations where we talk about art, we talk about photography, we talk about the vast media of the art world, and we're all looking at it on a screen, right? Which with terrible resolution, it's not the same. So we're really that rich environment that proximity gives to you, and that connectivity. And so I'm curious, Alexandra, your work, a lot of it is taking pictures of people, right? In their the human experience, the people and cultures living in kind of disparate urban and rural environments around the world. Are you taking pictures of people right now? What is your work like?
COVID, me too. COVID completely wiped everything out. I've, all travels off the table. All my, the work I do for business and client work is also travel. That all got canceled. And there are also places too where you can't travel. Fly into as an American. They're not allowing flights in. So I've been since March. This is the longest I've ever been in one place at one time, I think, in my entire life. I've been pretty much self-isolating since March. I've adapted. And my life has been kind of measured in square footage. So where I am located right now, though there has been a little silver lining in this, in that I have a wonderful backyard, and I have a lot of beautiful birds that come to my backyard. So I have hummingbirds, I have, there's lovebirds, you name it. So I've changed my focus, and I've never photographed nature before, and I never really gave much thought about photographing a bird. So I've kind of changed, I've adapted, and I've changed my focus to photographing the birds and the wildlife in my backyard, and I've had some of that work exhibited. So I know things will, it's just a matter of writing this out. And I know at some point things will slowly return to normal, but my life has been, everything I've done is completely off the table, but I know that that's just temporary. So it's just a matter of adjusting. And, it's kind of given, now more people are doing things online. So, there's more, I've been connecting more with people online, which of course is not the same thing as going in person. So my life has completely changed, but I've adapted. And like I said, that's been my silver lining. I guess now I'm a nature photographer. So it's just, there's not, you just gotta, write it out and
Adapt.
You gotta adapt and change. And I've been adapting and changing. So it's been, I've just been making, like when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. So I'm just trying to make lemonade out of everything. So there's been some good has come out of it too. It's just complete change.
Well, we will look forward to seeing your nature photographs.
Thanks.
In the next evolution of your body of work. I'm going to switch out and talk a little bit. I want to remind everyone on the call, you are more than welcome to contribute questions to this conversation. Just use the chat field below, type in your question, or use our Facebook Live comment field, and we will take questions and interject with attendee participation. So field those questions if you are so inclined. Emily, I'm going to switch to you, and it's slightly a media question, but that's kind of my angle, I think, based on maybe last night, based on what's going on in the world right now, based on political ads, based on a whole bunch of things that can be quite dangerous. And I want to talk about photography as a tool, photography as a weapon. FotoFocus has talked about this quite a lot. I still think it's really relevant, what's going on in today's kind of world. But using photography, thinking about photography as a tool for both kind of good and evil, as a truth-telling medium, a documentation medium, but also as a medium that can be easily manipulated and create a fabrication of reality. With photography and video kind of a witness to current events right now, it can help people make sense and process the moments currently, but there's also an inherent danger of relying on photography as being the ultimate truth. So I'm curious, what your insights are into that conflict, especially in today's current kind of social political climate.
Yeah, when you said that, I was just looking around. I had just used an excerpt of this book, and I can't remember the title, that was specifically talking about kind of colonialism and how photography was used. But it reminds me of the New York Times essay that Ta-Nehisi Coates did a few years ago, called "When Photography Was a Weapon." I mean, and we can argue that it still is, right? Because before, when I was talking about photography being power, if we think about who's taking the pictures and what reason they're taking the pictures and who they're taking the pictures for, right? How information is disseminated. We really have a complete divide in our country of the way in which people are understanding information, and that's really based on imagery. So I think it's a huge problem. There is no photographic truth per se. So we have to figure out how do we take that likeness of our world and interpret it, and who is doing that interpreting for us. I think it's really important to be an educated consumer of visual imagery, and deciding where you get your information from. Where do you see those images, and are you going to trust them? But I also think that photography can be very powerful if it is disseminating information that is truthful and appropriate. The person that is disseminating it is doing it in an appropriate way. I think it can be absolutely powerful. And we're in a really funky spot here, as a nation, on how, whose responsibility is it? Is it us as viewers? Is it us as consumers of imagery? Or is it us as the takers of imagery, the makers of imagery? And how do we have those conversations and have it not shut down because people are on ideologically opposite sides, but to really talk about what, the images, what photography can offer us as far as our knowledge base.
I'm going to follow that up with a two-part question to Alexandra. One is going to be related to this, and one is going to be related to birds, which we've gotten in the Q&A field. So first one, how has photography been the rear view mirror as we talk about history and making history that has helped us gain an understanding of past historical events? And then how do you think the relationship of photographers in the documentary, investigative, and kind of action reporting fields today differs from those in the past?
Well, photography is a universal language, and it does give us a look into our past. Like when we think of, there's always an iconic image. When we think about our past, there's always that defining moment that there's a photo that sums up. Like, for example, the Kent State shooting. There was in 1970 that won the Pulitzer Prize. That shooting took place for 13 seconds, but the photographer shot the photo, and it kind of summed up, that one photo kind of summed up, like, lost innocence. In Vietnam, yes, that photo. I mean, this one photo, it sums up that era and that time. And the same thing with Vietnam. There's always an iconic image or two that comes to mind that kind of defines an era, and that everyone, it's kind of in our collective memory. And when we think of an event, yes, this summed up the Vietnam War. It's always one. There seems to be one or two really powerful iconic images that sum it all up. As a matter of fact, this photo was considered so brutal and raw that President Richard Nixon even thought it was not authentic. And the photographer that took it said, no, this is what's going on. I can attest that this photo has not been faked in any way. And another well-known photo from the Vietnam War is that the Saigon execution by photographer Eddie Adams, where you see that Viet Cong. I didn't have a photo slide for that. There's no image. But that well-known photo of the Viet Cong being shot at point blank range. that kind of sums up, and you know, even, you know, civil rights, we can think of that one image of Martin Luther King. And I think going forward with everything that's going on now with the George Floyd protests, and I think people maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, there will be that one image, one or two images that sums that up, and that will get into our collective memory, and it'll kind of help us understand what went on during that period of time. And I think that's where photography is that powerful tool, because we are visual people. You know, our brains are oriented to understand. We process visual information much faster than we process any other kind of information. So we're kind of hardwired to look at things in that way. So I think that's going to be the same thing's going to be repeated going forward with events that are going on today. There's much more saturation, of course, today. There's much more photographers, there's much more outlets. There'll be more saturation, but I think the same thing will happen going forward. As you know, people like, you know, in 2040 will look back at this time like we might look at that same way we look at that image, you know, those images from Vietnam, and like that Kent State photo that I used as an example.
Emily, did you want to comment?
Yeah, is that okay? Can I jump in there?
Absolutely.
I think one thing that's going to be really interesting for us is that in the past, the people that have taken the pictures have been on one side or the other, right, of conflicts. We did have journalists at Kent State, but if you look at Vietnam, we don't have any images from Vietnamese photographers, right? We don't have images from indigenous peoples that were taken of them by them. We have Edward Curtis images, right? So we have a history that is a rearview mirror, but it's from a very specific perspective. And I think what's different about what's going on now, and what'll be exciting to see how this resonates and changes the way that people think about the issues at hand, is that photography has become so ubiquitous that we do have photographers embedded, per se, on all different angles of these issues now. And so that record is going to be reflecting a very different story, I think, than maybe previous times of angst in our country. So.
Yeah, you mentioned, I just wanted to add on the public murals in relation to George Floyd. There have been so many incredibly powerful portraits of him drawn on walls as part of memorials that are now emblazoned, I think, in our experience of that event, coupled with the video, coupled with the photographs. That art is a part of this process. We see it on our streets, we see it in protest, we see the creativity of our community coming out, actionating, really being present in the dialogue, and it's very, very powerful.
And as a curator yourself, like thinking about the canon of public art has been so formal, right? And so now we have this real like socially engaged public art that's coming out, and it's really amazing. And how is that going to shape the way in which we engage in art in the future? Like, I don't know. Yeah. It's going to be great though.
Yeah, expression. It's, I mean, it is tangible, right? So I'm going to switch to a little bit of a lighter subject, because I want to follow up on a question we got for Alexandra, which is about the relationship. Is there a relationship between the birds and the people and the way that you photograph them? The question is, do you think taking photos of birds is similar in some ways to taking photos of people? Are you documenting the life of birds in the way you document the life of people and how they live?
Well, the photographs, my street photography is sort of I'm documenting kind of life in the moment. And I think it kind of maybe translates to the same way with the birds, but the subject matter is radically different. So I'm just, you know, when I take a photo, it's very intuitive. I just kind of react to what's around me, what I see. Like when something looks good to me, I know it and I see it and I just react to it. So though radically different, I guess I have the same mindset with the birds. And photographing them it's a completely different set of challenges than photographing people. I mean, it's like kind of photographing apples and oranges, but my approach to them is the same, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, the process, your internal process, yeah, as a photographer is similar and standardized, I think, in terms of your subject matter.
Yes, correct.
Potentially. I think we have a thank you in the chat. I'm curious, we talked a little bit about kind of protests, and we talked a little bit about public art. Can we talk a little bit about the empowerment of the community to take photos, and how the changing technology associated with photography has altered the way in which we conceive kind of community and community representation, whether that's cell phone photography, drones, selfie sticks, as opposed to kind of the more traditional official avenues? And that's kind of an open question. So anyone wants to address it?
Well, I think photography now has become more, I guess, for lack of a better word, democratic, because, when I started out with film, and with film, you had to know, there's things that you had to know, and now it's become more ubiquitous. So it's given people an opportunity to photograph and be photographed more than used to be in the past, because with, a lot of photos are done by cell phones and a lot of videos done by cell phones. And now with digital cameras, that technical process, kind of the craft of it, has been made easier for people. So it's become easier for people to be in situations where they can photograph. I mean, if you look around, you can tell, if you look at a photo of an event, like say from 10, 15 years ago, and you see a crowd, you'll see a crowd. And now if you look at that same photo that would be taken today, you'd see everyone with their arms up, with their cell phones, because now everyone's recording and everyone's shooting. So it's become easier for people to express themselves in that way. Now, not everyone, does everyone do it well? No, but it is become more ubiquitous. And so I think that's kind of changed from certainly from the history and the tradition of photography. It's kind of a whole new ball game. So,
well, I think there's an interesting relation between using a camera phone. You have a filter between what you can actually see. So looking through a lens, one could argue, is not the same as seeing. It is capturing a composition. It is seeing through a filter. And yet the other side, and there's a great reminder in the chat about this, is that it's that capturing of life through a screen that has allowed us the opportunity to see what is happening in our cities and on our streets, in terms of what happened to George Floyd, in terms of what has happened to our community of disenfranchised and people of color. Particularly as it relates to the police, going all the way back to Rodney King, right? So it's an empowerment tool. It is in essence, goes back to the conversation about being a truth-telling medium, but you're still not seeing it, right? It's a recording of something that is shared. And so it's just a really interesting divide and filter back from your reality of experience.
I would add too, as far as, would there be the explosion of photography without the social media platforms? Would you have all these photographs being taken if we didn't share them, didn't have Instagram and Facebook? Would people take all these photographs and then they stay on their phone and then they flip through them just by themselves? So I think it's all tied together.
I do too. And I think that the ways in which photography has built community, especially in communities of color is that there are social media platforms where people are being able to share with each other, and you have many celebrities that are popping up, you have information sharing, you have this way of building community, because the mainstream culture, you know, it's like, oh, Vogue has used the same Black photographer twice. Wow, aren't they amazing? You know, it's like, well, you know, there's not the representation in mainstream culture, right? And so being able to create spaces where everything can be catered toward a specific community, everyone that's contributing to that can be catered towards that community, has really opened, I think, things up for folks to feel included and to have a voice, to be able to express themselves in ways that, you know, were not public before.
I think that's true. Yeah, that's a good point. I think especially with the George Floyd protests, a lot of African-American photographers were able to go out and document it, and they just felt compelled that this is, you know, this is something that they had to do. And in today's world, that they did have the means of doing that, and there are places that they can share, and you know, it's kind of cathartic for them. So I think that's a very good point that you brought up.
I want to encourage any additional questions. We have about 10 more minutes of conversation. So if there are additional questions, we'd love to share them with the panelists so we can get some insight and feedback. In the meantime, Jens, I'm really curious, in terms of the exhibitions you have planned in the space, what's the percentage of photography versus painting versus other mediums and film, etc.? Do you have what is the long-term plan, especially as you are expanding the gallery space? What's the long-term vision?
Well, originally the idea with Pendleton Street Photography was photography and prints, but with the opening up the new space, it is pivoting. And again, I'm still building the programming out for the next year, since I was wiped out mostly just with Cuban artists. Working on one project with a photographer in the Pendleton Art Center, Mike Savage. It's going to be a legacy project where he's taking portraits of people who tell their story. So that'll come up in December. And then working on another photography exhibition with Andrew Van Sickle, who was very much a part of the Club Claw scene, the scene back in 2000, 2001. He took, 5,000 shots. And so we're going to go through that archive and produce them. And the plan was to have that this year and recreate the whole club scene in the gallery. Of course, that's you know, can no longer be. And that goes back to also, you know, a couple of months ago, I decided to reopen the gallery after the stay at home is, you know, if I'm waiting for a vaccine or herd immunity, whatever, and when it's safe to come out, I think it'll be a year. So I decided to reopen, but do it safely, you know, safely for me, but also safely and have people feel safe coming here. So, you know, social distancing, I've got arrows on the floor, and not expecting the large crowds that we typically have with an opening. So you get more people who want to come out, like not on Final Friday. You know, they want to come out and just with a couple of people and see it. And the exhibit we had previously, the mask exhibit, you know, doesn't show well. You've mentioned this before. It doesn't show well online. You know, it's 3D, you need to see it. And so that worked out very well. And that was a response to a lot of artists wanting to produce masks during the stay at home collection of Sarah Vance Waddell. So again, I think starting out mostly photography, I think it's going to pivot and get into more social issue exhibitions, you know, not a pure commercial art type of gallery. Working with other nonprofits, working on a project with CAC, developing that. So having taken the new space, I kind of grabbed the space before I had a programming. So we have a blank canvas here. So reaching out to other nonprofits and guest curators that would like some nice white walls. So I've got about 4,000 square feet here, and 2021 is pretty open. I've got one regional artist coming in May. So
that's quite a bit of space. That's very exciting to add to the experience of Cincinnati art viewing here. I would like to encourage people. There is, as Jens has addressed, there are safe ways to see work in person. It's interesting that we've really changed like the way and time you see work, making appointments to go to the museum, going to see an exhibition at noon or 9 as opposed to going to see people. It's almost a more honest way to see the work. It's disconnected from the network, right? It's disconnected from the social experience of an opening, which is a really difficult time to see work, in my opinion. I like to see work in a quiet space where I can actually have an intimate relationship with the work, as opposed to being distracted. And so,
yeah, and in the past, we would go as an artist, we would go to openings to network, and then circle back later to actually see the work. You know, and so many artists are social animals and want to reach out and interact, and openings are for that.
Absolutely. And I think there's a tremendous sadness to not having that connectivity and community to the arts neighborhood. But it's an interesting way to see work, to transition to see work. Mm-hmm. So I would encourage you, the American Alliance for Museums has put out a statistic that nearly maybe a third, I think, of art institutions will not survive this pandemic. So I encourage you, this is my pitch, to encourage you to support your region's art spaces, your national spaces, and your artists. Because if we don't support them, they aren't going to be around. It's the same as you would a small business. If you want the restaurant on the corner to be around, you have to support it. We have to, not only put our money where our mouth is, but we have to vote. So this is me. Champion.
That's good. That's good. And I think people are, have cabin fever and do want to get out, but just want to do it safely. This is great having the salon here, but it'd be better if it was in person. So I think everybody is, wants to, get out, getting kind of a Zoom fatigue.
It's a real thing.
The only advantage is you don't have to wash my shirt as often. I can wear the same shirt for 3 months.
Oh, thanks
with Zoom meetings.
Thanks for sharing that in a public forum.
Yeah.
We just have a few more minutes. I do want to give each of you panelists an opportunity to close out and to contribute anything that we may have that you'd like to before we wrap up in a couple minutes. Emily, would you like to, sorry, Jens, go right ahead.
I would just want to thank FotoFocus. You said earlier what a tough decision it was, but it was really well received. It's really wonderful for you to I had not applied for a grant, so I was not expecting any funding. And so it was a very nice gesture, understanding the difficulty of the decision, but it was great for your organization. So I look forward to 2022 when we can all kick it off again.
We do too. It's imperative for us to have partners and to have a community. And it was really the only option that we had to show how incredibly grateful we are for the support of our partners for making the biennial a real thing, because we could not do it without our partners. So thanks. Emily, Alexandra, anything else you'd like to add as we wrap up?
I would like to add to what you said, that maybe people don't realize that how much museums and galleries are in trouble. So anyone, if you can, support your arts when it's safe to go out, go to a show, become a member of a museum, become a member of a gallery, donate to a gallery, buy work for an artist, tell your friends to come. If you want to go to a museum or a gallery, bring your friends. So we just need to kind of do as much as we can to help support the arts, because all the arts, theaters too, everyone is in serious trouble, and that may not be so universally known. So that's my parting thought for people to help the arts.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. I also want to make sure that CCAC is getting some love there too. They do amazing work, not just in the arts, but other community activities too. So make sure and support them. And I guess my parting words would be that photography is like a really strong muscle, that now we all have this thing, and that, the theme of this panel is photography and community building, that we could use this to connect each other, even in this time when we are apart. And in that, thinking of flexibility and being graceful towards all the crazy situations that may be thrown at us, but also knowing that we have immense power in social change just by using our cameras.
Thank you so much.
Good
I really
point.
appreciate this inspired panel, and for everyone who spent time with us tonight to be part of this conversation. I'd like to send it back to Emmeline for any closing thoughts on behalf of CCAC.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much to our featured panel. Thank you for joining us on this Wednesday evening. Yes, virtual round of applause for everyone. I'd like to encourage you to attend our next salon on November 18th. We'll be here back on Zoom on the topic of women in writing. So you can find more about that by visiting our website. I put a link in the chat there. So with that, we'll say thank you again, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.